All right, so today let's take a deep dive into something pretty interesting. The UAE-Iran Joint Economic Committee.
Hmm.
When you hear about these international committees, you probably think, oh, great, another one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this one's got some interesting stuff going on that makes it way more interesting than just a diplomatic handshake.
Yeah, you're right. There's definitely more to this than meets the eye, especially when you consider the history between these two countries.
For sure. We're going to unpack all this using a couple of sources. We've got the press release straight from the UAE's Ministry of Economy, and they're painting a pretty optimistic picture. And then we'll compare that to data from the Observatory of Economic Complexity.
Right.
Those guys, they don't really sugarcoat anything.
That's what makes this deep dive so interesting. It's like you've got the aspirational goals that the committee laid out, and then you've got the reality of what's actually happening.
Okay, so let's jump into that press release. The UAE ministry is talking a lot about expanding into new sectors, setting up these joint task forces, supporting small and medium enterprises. They're really focused on things like tourism, renewable energy, and even R&D collaborations.
That's right. It's a very forward-looking strategy. It's not just about boosting trade that's already happening. It's about building a more integrated economic future for both countries.
Yeah, it sounds good. But then you look at the trade data from the Observatory of Economic Complexity and things get a little
Now we're complicated.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the first thing that really stands out is the difference in how much each country is exporting. The UAE's exports to Iran are way bigger than Iran's exports to the UAE.
Yeah.
We're talking like 15 times bigger. So you have to ask yourself, what's causing that imbalance?
That is a huge gap. So what's the deal? Why is the UAE such a powerhouse in this relationship? Well, it's kind of a combination of things. The UAE has really invested in its infrastructure. They've created this environment that's really attractive to foreign investors. Plus, they have a really strategic location. They're like a hub for trade between Asia, Africa, and Europe.
And what are they actually trading? It looks like the top exports from the UAE to Iran are broadcasting equipment and
Yeah, it's nuts. It is an interesting mix. The broadcasting equipment suggests there's a demand for media technology in Iran. Maybe it's for developing their infrastructure, or maybe their media sector is growing. And then nets, well, those are a pretty basic food, so it shows that this trade relationship is helping to meet some basic needs in Iran.
Okay, so we have this kind of complex and uneven trade relationship, but here's another interesting thing. The observatory's data also shows that overall trade between the two countries has actually gone down in the last few years.
That's right, and it's probably because of a few different factors, including sanctions against Iran, which have definitely made it harder for their economy to grow and trade freely.
Yes, sanctions are definitely a big factor, but there's also the global economic shifts and changes in supply chains around the world that are affecting things too. To get a better visual idea of all of this, the observatory has this tool called the Market Competitiveness Map.
Yeah, it basically shows you who's trading with who on a global scale. And when you look at it, the difference between the UAE and Iran is really obvious. The UAE is right in the middle of everything. They're heavily connected to all the major economies. But then you look at Iran, and their trade is mostly with smaller regional partners.
It's a really clear picture of that trade gap, and it leads us to this other interesting section in the data called potential exports. It's where they highlight areas where both countries could be trading a lot more based on what they're already capable of producing.
It's like they're saying, hey, why aren't you guys doing more of this? It's a really interesting way to see all of the untapped potential in this relationship.
It makes you wonder, why haven't those potential exports happened? Is it all just politics or economics, or maybe a mix of both?
It's probably a bit of everything. You've got lingering political tensions, bureaucratic stuff. Maybe people just aren't aware of the opportunities. Or maybe businesses are hesitant to jump in because of the uncertainty in the region.
Yeah, it's a bit of a puzzle trying to figure out the motivations and the roadblocks. But let's think about this in terms of actual people. We're not just talking about numbers and data here. We're talking about people and businesses trying to figure out this complicated situation.
You're right. It's important to remember that.
Like, imagine you're an entrepreneur in either the UAE or Iran. This changing relationship, it creates challenges and opportunities.
It does.
On the one hand, closer ties could open up new markets, create new partnerships, and give you access to resources and expertise that you didn't have before. There's a lot of potential for growth and innovation.
But then there's the other side of it. There's more competition, uncertainty about regulations, and political risks. It could have a negative impact on your business. It's a risky situation.
For sure. So that makes this Joint Economic Committee even more interesting. Is this just a symbolic thing to make political relations better? or is a real attempt to build a stronger economic partnership?